Welcome to Before It Breaks with Gabriella Pomare. This is the podcast for the conversations people usually have too late. The conversations you have in your head before you say them out loud. The ones you avoid because the children are in the next room. The ones you type into your notes app and never send. The ones you whisper to a friend over coffee because saying them at home might change everything. I'm Gabriella Pomare, family lawyer, author of The Collaborative Co-Parent. I'm a mum and I'm a co-parent. And this is the podcast where we talk honestly about modern relationships, marriage, separation, co-parenting, conflict repair, rebuilding, and the quiet things that happen before a relationship breaks. This podcast is not about perfect families. It's about conscious ones. For the before, for the break, for the becoming. Now, before we begin, I do want to remind you that this podcast is for general information and education only. It's not therapy, legal advice, or advice about your specific relationship or family. Every relationship, family, separation, and co-parenting dynamic is different. Now, today's episode is one of the big ones. It's one of those topics people don't usually say out loud until they're already exhausted by it. Staying for the kids. Even the phrase carries so much. It carries love, it carries guilt, it carries fear, it carries duty. It carries the grief of the family you thought your children were going to have. And it carries the private questions so many parents are terrified to ask. Am I protecting my children by staying? Or am I asking them to live inside something that is quietly hurting them? Because there are some questions in family life that are not really questions. They're rooms people live inside for years. Should I stay? Should I go? Am I being selfish? Am I being brave? Am I about to ruin their childhood? Or are they already living inside a version of family life that looks intact from the outside, but feels tense or lonely or unsafe on the inside? And that is the conversation I want to have today. It's not a simplistic conversation, and it's definitely not an episode telling people to leave. It's also not an episode telling people to stay. Because anybody who gives a simple answer to this question probably is not sat close enough to the complexity of it. There are relationships that can repair. There are relationships that should end, and there are people who leave too quickly. But there are also people who stay too long, and there are children who are deeply affected by separation. But there are also children who are deeply affected by parents staying together in misery. So today I don't want to ask only, is it better to stay together for the kids? I think that question's too small. The better question is, what are the children actually living inside? Not what does the family look like from the outside, not whether the family photo is still intact, and not whether both parents are technically under the same roof. Not whether everyone can turn up together to school events or birthday parties and Christmas lunch and look like a family. The real question is, what does it feel like to be a child in that home? Are they living inside warmth or tension? Are they living inside safety or unpredictability? Are they living inside repair or resentment? Are they watching two adults work through something hard with honesty and humility? Or are they watching two adults quietly disappear from each other and call it sacrifice? Because staying for the kids only works if the relationship you're staying in is emotionally safe enough for them to live inside. That is the line. And I know that sentence may land differently depending on where you are in your life. Some people will hear it and feel relief because it gives language to something they felt for years. Some people will hear it and feel defensive because they've been holding the family together with everything they have. Some people will hear it and feel grief because deep down they know the children are already living inside the silence. And some people will hear it and think, but I don't have a choice. And I want to make room for that because not everyone can simply leave. Money is real, housing is real, safety is real, and culture is real. Family pressure is real. Religious beliefs are real, and the cost of living is real. Fear is real. The thought of splitting a child's life between two homes can feel unbearable. The thought of not waking up with your children every morning can feel like a grief that you cannot even let yourself imagine. So, this is not one of those simplistic conversations where someone says, choose happiness, and acts as though everyone can just walk into a new life with clarity and confidence. Family life is more complicated than that. But what I do think is this: we need to become more honest about what staying actually means, because sometimes staying is noble and sometimes staying is deeply loving. Sometimes staying means two adults saying, we're not okay. We've lost our way, but we're going to get help. We're going to stop hurting each other. We're going to change the way this home feels. We're going to repair, not just for ourselves, but because our children deserve to live around love that's awake, not just a family structure that is technically intact. That kind of saying can be powerful. It can teach children that relationships do go through difficult seasons, that people can take responsibility, that adults can apologize and grow and forgive and rebuild, that love is not just ease and chemistry. Sometimes love is accountability. Sometimes love is humility. Sometimes love is choosing to do the work when walking away would be easier. I believe in that. I really do. I believe some families can come back from the edge. And I believe some couples are not finished. They're buried. They're buried under stress or resentment and exhaustion, financial pressure, mental load, disappointment, loneliness, and years of not saying the things that needed to be said. I believe repair is possible where there is safety and honesty and humility and real behavioral change. But staying is not automatically noble just because children are involved. Sometimes staying is avoidance, it's fear and guilt and financial panic. Sometimes it's cultural shame, and sometimes it's not really about the children. Sometimes it's about not being able to bear the family photo changing. And I say that with compassion, because the grief is real. When people have children, they do not usually picture overnight bags and shared calendars, separate Christmas mornings, school holiday negotiations, or standing on opposite sides of a school event trying to act normal. They imagine togetherness, the house, the birthdays, the school photos, the family holidays, the two parents sitting beside each other at assemblies, the ordinary comfort of everyone belonging to the same home. So when that picture starts to crack, of course people panic. Of course they bargain. Of course they say, maybe we can just get through this. Of course they think maybe it's better for the kids if we stay. And sometimes, maybe it is. But not always. Because children don't only experience the structure of the family, they experience the atmosphere of it. They know when the car goes quiet. They know when one parent's face changes as the other walks in. They know when everyone relaxes because someone has left the room. They know when dinner feels tense. They know when affection is gone. They know when one parent is trying too hard. They know when nobody says anything but the whole room feels loud. Children may not have adult language, but they're incredibly good at reading emotional weather. They know when the air is different. And this is where parents can get it wrong. Not because they don't love their children, but because they underestimate what children absorb. Parents say we never fight in front of them, and sometimes that's true. But children do not only learn from fights. They learn from silence. They learn from coldness, from avoidance, eye rolls, the way one parent constantly corrects the other, the way nobody touches, the way apologies never happen, the way love is described but not demonstrated, the way everyone pretends. And sometimes children become very loyal to the pretending. That's the heartbreaking part. Children often protect the family story before they even understand it. They might become extra cheerful. They might become quiet. They might become helpful. They might become anxious. They might become the little peacekeeper, the one who changes the subject, the one who makes a joke, the one who performs happiness because they can sense the adults need them to be okay. And then when we say the kids are fine, they're actually not fine. Sometimes they're just cooperating with the family performance. Now, I do want to be careful here. I don't want any parent listening to this to think we had a hard season and now we've damaged our children. That is not what I'm saying. Children do not need perfect parents. They don't need a perfect home. They don't need adults who never argue or never get tired and never snap, never feel disconnected, never go through difficult periods. Children can live with imperfection. They can live with stress. They can live with parents who disagree and who have hard seasons. But what they need is repair. They need to see that conflict doesn't mean collapse. They need to see adults come back and say, I'm sorry. They need to know people can be angry without being cruel. They need to feel that the home is not built on eggshells. They need to know that they're not responsible for managing the emotional state of the adults. They need to know that love doesn't mean swallowing yourself until you disappear. And that is where the real question begins. Are we staying and repairing, or are we staying and teaching them that this is what love looks like? Because children learn love by watching it, by what they live near. And if they live near tenderness, they learn tenderness. And if they live near respect, they learn respect. If they live near repair, then they learn repair. But if they live near contempt, they might learn contempt. And if they live near emotional distance, they may learn distance is normal. If they live near one parent constantly sacrificing themselves and calling it devotion, they may learn that love requires self-erasure. And if they live near one parent dominating the emotional weather of the home, they may learn that love means walking on eggshells. And if they live near two adults who never laugh and never repair and never touch and never tell the truth, they may learn that commitment means endurance without warmth. That's what worries me. Not that the children will know that their parents had problems, they will. But what worries me is children growing up thinking a loveless, hostile, or emotionally empty relationship's normal because nobody ever named it. And I think this is where we have to talk about stability, because one of the most common reasons people stay is stability. I want to give my children stability, and I understand that, I really do. But stability is not just two parents under one roof. Stability is emotional safety. Stability is predictability. Stability is knowing the adults can manage themselves. Stability is not having to scan the room before you speak. Stability is not wondering which version of the house you're coming home to. Stability is not everyone pretending the truth would be too disruptive. Stable conflict is not the same as healthy stability. Stable coldness is not the same as love. Stable resentment is not the same as security. A child can have the same address and still live in emotional uncertainty. And a child can have two homes and still feel deeply loved, held, and secure if the adults are thoughtful, respectful, and child-centered. Now, that doesn't mean separation's easy. It's not. I know that. I've been through it. Separation affects children. Of course it does. It changes routines and finances, bedrooms and holidays and traditions, family identity. It challenges the way ordinary life feels. And even the most careful separation is still a loss. It needs care, it needs maturity, it needs support. It needs adults who are willing to carry their own pain without handing it to the child. But staying also impacts children, and that is the point. There is no choice here that leaves children untouched. So the question can't be, how do we make a decision that has no impact? There is no such decision. The question is, which environment gives these children the best chance of emotional safety and truth and stability and love? And sometimes that means repairing the relationship. Sometimes that means separating, but with dignity. Sometimes it means getting support before making any decision. And sometimes it means telling the truth for the first time in a long time. But if you are going to stay for the kids, stay actively. Stay with intention, stay with humility, stay with help. Stay with real conversations. Stay with the willingness to change the thing the children are actually living inside. Because staying without change is not a plan, it's a holding pattern. And families can live in holding patterns for years, waiting for the kids to get older, waiting for school to finish, waiting for money to improve, waiting for the mortgage to feel less terrifying or for the youngest to start school. Always waiting for a better time. But while everyone's waiting, the children are still growing and they're still watching and they're still learning what love looks like. And sometimes the better time never comes. So if the decision is to stay, then the next question has to be, well, what changes now? Not in 6 months, not after the next holiday, not when work calms down, and not when the children are older, but now. What changes in the tone of the home? What changes in the way we speak to each other? What changes in the way we apologize? What changes in the way we manage conflict and in the way we show affection and respect and care? What changes so that our children are not simply living inside a preserved structure, but inside a healthier emotional world? Because that is the difference between staying as a conscious choice and staying as avoidance. One is active and the other is passive. One says we're going to do the work, but the other says we're going to hope the children don't notice. And they do. And I want to talk about the quiet, unhappy marriage because this is one of the versions that is the easiest to dismiss. When people think of damaging homes, they often think of loud homes, screaming, slamming doors, obvious chaos. And yes, high conflict homes are deeply harmful. Children should not be living inside fear or intimidation and constant fighting. But quiet unhappiness can shape children too. The house where nobody screams, but nobody's warm. The parents who function beautifully in public, but don't speak in private. The dinners that are polite, but empty. The car rides where everyone knows something's wrong, but no one says it. The parent who has become efficient, but joyless. The parent who's physically present, but emotionally gone. The relationship that has become administrative, school notes and groceries and bills and logistics. No curiosity, no real tenderness, no affection, no laughter, no visible choosing of each other. That teaches children something too. It can teach them that love is endurance, that partnership is logistics, that intimacy disappears after children, that adults don't need tenderness, and that family means everyone staying in position no matter what it costs. And again, I'm not saying that long-term relationships need to feel romantic all the time. They don't. Long-term love changes and parenthood changes people. There's tired seasons and practical seasons and stressful seasons. And there are times when the relationship has to carry a lot. But if the relationship has become permanently emotionally empty and the only thing keeping it standing is fear of disruption, that deserves honesty. Because children may not need their parents to be wildly in love, but they do need to see respect and warmth and care and repair. They need emotional honesty. They need to see adults who are alive inside their choices. That phrase matters. Alive inside their choices. Because sacrifice can be loving, but self-abandonment is different. And children feel the difference. A parent who chooses to stay in repair carries a very different energy from a parent who stays, says nothing, and slowly becomes resentful, bitter, or empty. Children don't need martyrs, they need adults. Adults who can make hard choices consciously. And this is where guilt becomes so powerful because there's a particular kind of guilt that comes with being a parent and questioning the relationship. It can feel like betrayal before you think you've even done anything. You look at your child asleep and you think, how could I do this to you? You imagine them packing a bag and your chest hurts, and you imagine telling them and it feels unbearable. You imagine not waking up with them every morning and something inside you collapses, and you tell yourself, I cannot leave. I cannot do that to them. And that love is real. That fear is real. But I want to gently ask, what are you asking them to live inside if you stay exactly as things are now? Not if you stay in repair, not if you stay in rebuild, but if nothing changes. If the silence continues, if the contempt continues, if the loneliness continues, if the children keep learning this version of love, what then? Because sometimes parents are so focused on protecting children from the pain of separation that they can't fully see the pain of the current home. We can become very honest about the risks of leaving and very dishonest about the cost of staying. We list everything separation might do to children, but we avoid listing what the existing relationship is already doing. And again, that doesn't mean leaving is automatically the answer. It means the current home deserves the same level of scrutiny as the imagined separation. And that's where hiding can happen, not maliciously, not because parents don't care, usually because they carry so much they cannot bear to look directly at the truth. So, they say we're staying for the kids, and maybe they are. But maybe they're also staying because they're terrified. Terrified of money, terrified of being alone, of judgment and conflict and co parenting and losing time with their children. Terrified of starting again and terrified of admitting that the life they built is changing. Fear deserves compassion, but fear should not be allowed to dress itself up as the children's best interests without being questioned. And that's the raw part. Sometimes I'm staying for the kids really means I'm too frightened to face what changing this family would require. And that doesn't make you a bad person, it makes you human. The children shouldn't have to carry the emotional debt of an adult self abandonment. They shouldn't have to grow up feeling, even quietly, that a parent gave up their life because of them. That's too heavy. And if you stay because you're choosing to build something healthier, not because you're silently making your children the reason you abandoned yourself. But now I also want to speak to the person who's maybe leaving too quickly, because that happens too. Sometimes people hit a hard season and assume the relationship's over when what the relationship really needs is just honest work. Sometimes people are sold the idea that if a relationship's difficult, it's toxic. People confuse discomfort with incompatibility, or they confuse boredom or burnout with the absence of love. Sometimes they leave because the fantasy of a clean slate feels easier than the work of repair. And that matters too. Because children shouldn't lose the family structure lightly. A relationship with children deserves serious reflection before it's ended, where it's safe to do so. Because sometimes the problem is not that there's no love. Sometimes the relationship's just been neglected. Sometimes it's been buried under parenting and stress and pressure and disappointment and years of just not knowing how to come back to each other. And if there's safety and if both people are willing to take responsibility, repair may be worth attempting. Not because children need parents together at all costs, but because children benefit from watching adults take responsibility for something meaningful instead of abandoning it the moment it becomes hard. That's another kind of modeling. I mean, children can learn resilience from repair. They learn humility. They learn that love can survive difficulty when people are willing to grow. But they shouldn't be asked to learn that love means ongoing harm or contempt or fear or emotional starvation. That's the distinction. Repair is not tolerating the intolerable. Repair is two people actively changing the conditions of the relationship. And if one person's doing that, it's not repair, it's endurance. So, how do you know whether staying is protective or avoidant? You need to look at what's actually changing. Not what's promised, but what's changing. Are conversations becoming safer? Is there less contempt? Are apologies followed by behaviour? Are the children exposed to less tension, and is affection returning, even slowly? Is there support and honesty and a shared commitment to creating a healthier home? And if yes, staying may be a powerful and loving choice. But if the cycle keeps repeating, and if one person keeps begging and the other keeps minimizing, if the house feels calm only because one person has stopped speaking, and if the children are living inside emotional weather that everyone denies, then it may be time to ask whether staying for the kids has become a phrase that protects the adults from the truth more than it protects the children. And I know that's hard. It's the kind of thing people think about in the car after school drop off or in the shower at night when everyone else is asleep. It's the thing they don't say at dinner parties because everyone else seems fine. But so many people are asking it. People in beautiful homes, people with toddlers, people with teenagers, people married 2 years, 20 years, people who still love each other, people who can't stand each other, people in therapy, people pretending everything is fine. People waiting for the children to finish school, people waiting for someone else to make the decision so they don't have to be the one who changes the family. And if that's you, I want you to hear this. You are not a bad parent because you're asking the question. Sometimes asking the question is the first honest thing you've done in a long time. Denial's not protection. Pretending's not protection. A family photo is not protection. Children need more than the appearance of togetherness. They need emotional truth held by adults who are brave enough to deal with it. That might mean staying and repairing. That might mean separating with care. That might mean asking for help, and that might mean having the conversation you've avoided for months. That might mean saying, without blame, I don't want our children to think that this is what love is. And that sentence can be a wake-up call because every family teaches. We teach children how conflict sounds. We teach them whether apologies matter. We teach them whether affection survives stress and whether silence is safer than truth. We teach our kids whether love is warm and respectful or whether love is a performance everyone maintains so the outside world feels comfortable. And the hopeful part, I suppose, is this. We can change what our children are learning. We can interrupt the pattern. We can repair. We can rebuild. We can stop pretending. We can create a home, whether one or two, where children don't have to become experts in tension. Because the goal is not simply to keep the family together. The goal is to keep the children emotionally safe. So maybe the question's not should I stay or should I go? Maybe the question is what kind of home are we asking our children to go up inside? And what would it take to make the home emotionally safer? If we stay, we need to repair. And if we leave, we need to do it with care. And if guilt's the barrier, we need to be honest about that. And if the children are already absorbing the conflict, we need to be honest about that. Because staying for the kids only works if the relationship you're staying in is emotionally safe enough for them to live inside. And if it's not, then the answer may not be immediate separation, but it must be change. Something has to change. The silence, the contempt, the avoidance, the pretending. The way that children have become the reason no one tells the truth. Children shouldn't have to grow up inside a family that looks whole from the outside, but feels lonely or tense or unsafe on the inside. They deserve more than a preserved image. They deserve adults who are brave enough to rebuild, repair, and restructure a life with honesty. And so do you. And so if this episode has found you somewhere tender, I don't want to leave you with panic. I don't want you to turn this off and make a dramatic decision tonight. And I don't want you to hear this as a command to stay or a permission slip to leave. I want you to hear it as an invitation to tell the truth, quietly and maybe only to yourself. What are my children actually living inside? What are they learning about love from inside our home? What are they learning about conflict and silence and repair and respect and self-worth? What would courage look like here? Not dramatic courage, not impulsive courage, the honest courage. The courage to seek help, the courage to name the pattern, the courage to stop pretending, the courage to repair properly, the courage to accept that the version of togetherness you're preserving is not the version of your family children deserve to live inside. Because before a family breaks publicly, there's usually a private truth that has been whispering for a long time. And sometimes the beginning of change is not a decision. Sometimes it's just the moment we stop lying to ourselves. Staying for the kids can be beautiful if staying means love and repair and humility and change. But staying for the kids can also become a burden they never asked to carry, if staying means silence and resentment and fear and pretending. So let the question be bigger than stay or go. Let it be, what kind of emotional inheritance are we giving our children? And are we brave enough to change it? I'm Gabriella Pomare, and this is Before It Breaks. And maybe the most loving thing we can do for our children is not simply to keep the family looking whole. Maybe it's to become honest enough, brave enough, and awake enough to build a family life that actually feels safe to live inside.